In light of this fuel subsidy strike action happening in Nigeria, which is potentially crippling for the country, considering that all oil and gas production has been ordered to shut down on Sunday, we now look at a more comprehensive look at the effect of fuel taxes on the poor. And take up this discussion, we're joined in our Cape Town studios by Professor Thomas Stirner, who's Professor of Environmental Economics in Gothenburg and also in Washington. So welcome very much to our shores, and I think you come at a time where this issue of fuel taxes is timely, because the big question is, what are they used for? When government taxes us every time we fill up, what does it do with it?
It uses the money like it uses all tax revenue, in the same way, either to provide real services or perhaps to waste the money.
The big issue in Nigeria is the latter, is that the government's never really done anything constructive with oil revenues, with fuel subsidies, and now that they're removing them, $8 billion goes back into the fiscus, and they're not really sure what it's going to be utilized for. So, in your views, following events in Nigeria, valid concerns?
Yes, I think this is a very tragic development, and of course our thoughts must go to the several people who have been shot dead in Nigeria. It's really tragic. It's doubly tragic because it's actually a very sensible thing to do, is to abolish fuel subsidies. It is quite unreasonable in a poor country like Nigeria to take budget money and subsidize something that is mainly used by the middle class and upper class. It's much better to subsidize something that is badly needed by the poor.
I'm glad you've mentioned this dichotomy between the poor and the middle class, because some people are saying, you know, although we're talking about the welfare of all Nigerians, it doesn't actually impact the welfare of all Nigerians. The people who benefit from fuel subsidies, as you're saying, are the middle class, the people who have cars, are those who are importers of fuel, marketers of fuel. The poor don't really feature in this equation. So why are we making it a big social issue in a country like Nigeria?
I think that the people who stand to benefit are various, and the middle class and upper class are one. There are also, importantly, some oil companies involved, I think, in smuggling. If the state subsidizes the fuel, then it's very tempting to sell it to neighboring countries where it's unsubsidized. And when these people are about to lose their privilege and their corrupt business, they will take to the streets and try to create as big a confusion as they can. And they won't go out and say, don't touch my smuggling money, don't touch my Porsche or my Mercedes. They will go out and say, this is bad for the poor. But that's not true, but still people are fooled.
All right, now when we talk about the poor, how are they impacted by issues like fuel subsidies, petrol taxes? I suppose it's on the question of the delivery of basic social services. Where does it work well?
Well, I think it's a simple-minded analysis is that it's best if everything is free. So free petrol would be good, free food would be good, free clothing would be good. But in a realistic economy, we have to pay the price of goods. And the government has a very limited budget with which it can subsidize things. It's much better if the government subsidizes education, health, water and sanitation, roads, and a few other things. Subsidizing petrol just is far down on the list, and it's, in my opinion, rather the opposite. It is a good that should be taxed.
Professor, give us best practices. I mean, just coming from Scandinavia, where you also teach, people often cite the example of Norway, for instance, as being an oil-producing country that's used oil revenues for broader infrastructure and social development, that's used high taxes for broader public goods spending, and as a result, people buy into a system of high taxes and high levies because they can see the fruits of their labor. What lessons can we learn from places like that?
Yes, I was very recently in Norway, and it has the most expensive fuel, just about the most expensive in Europe. It's certainly even more expensive than in Sweden. And they put the revenues of the oil money into a fund. The fund is used for big development projects and as an investment for the future.
All right, so talking about things like a sovereign wealth fund, Nigeria is also dabbling with that idea over and above the removal of fuel subsidies. For instance, if you could sit with the Nigerian leadership today and offer your expertise, your expert knowledge, what would be some of your suggestions on how best to handle the situation?
Well, I was speaking to Nigerian students. I'm here with the UCT, the EPRO. They're starting a new master's program on the economics of climate change and sustainable development. And there were some Nigerian students. We were talking about this. They mentioned to me that in the 1980s, Nigeria had a fund, much like the Norwegian one, and that it was actually a popular fund that did good development work. So one piece of advice might be to go back to that system. And another piece of advice, possibly, I've been reading what Good Luck Jonathan has said, and he said that he would use the money wisely for the benefit of the poor. I think the trouble is that people doubt the ability of the Nigerian government at this particular point. They're in the middle of a civil war almost, and this government needs to show that. I think the same day that they abolished the subsidy on fuel, they should have put in another subsidy. They should have said, now we are subsidizing health or education. Or they opened some universities with free admission. They should have done something else to show that now we are putting our money into that. You can't just vaguely say we will use the money in a good way. You actually have to show it.
Yeah, okay, thanks so much for your insights there. Thomas Sterner is a professor of environmental economics at Gothenburg in Sweden and also a university fellow of RFF in Washington, and obviously, as you can see, they're co-author of a book, Fuel Taxes and the Poor. So for some insights there, you can refer to that.